So, when you hear the phrase classroom management, what's the first thing that pops in your head? For most of us, it's probably discipline, right? Rules, consequences, handling kids who are acting out. But what if I told you that's just scratching the surface? Today, we're going to dig into what classroom management really is, the art and science of building an environment where learning can actually happen.
Let's start with a big question. I want you to think back for a second. Think about the best teacher you ever had. What was it about them that made them so great? Was it just that they were smart, or super passionate, or was it something about the way their classroom felt? That feeling of it being a place where you were safe, you were seen, and you were actually ready to learn.
Researchers have looked into this a ton, and they've identified all these different skills that make a teacher effective. Everything from problem solving to just keeping up with their own professional development. But if you look at this slide, you'll see that classroom management is right there at the bottom. It's the foundation. It's the one thing that holds everything else up. It literally creates the space for all the other magic to happen.
Okay, so let's get on the same page. What is classroom management, officially? Well, it's not just about keeping kids quiet. The formal definition calls it the provisions and procedures needed to create an atmosphere where teaching and learning can flourish. Think of it like this. It's the architecture of the classroom. It's the blueprint for success.
And this brings us to a really critical point. A great classroom isn't built on a long list of rules. No, it's built on a foundation of something way more fundamental, and that's basic human needs. You've probably seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before, right? Well, it applies so perfectly to the classroom. Before a student can even think about reaching their full potential, what Maslow called self-actualization, they absolutely have to feel safe, they have to feel secure, and they have to feel like they belong. A truly great teacher gets this. They build their classroom from the ground up, starting with those basic, essential needs. So how does a teacher actually create that sense of safety and belonging? Well, it all comes down to the classroom climate. The teacher is basically an architect, and they're designing two spaces at once, the physical space and the psychological space. Now, the physical layout of a room is so much more than just where you put the furniture. It's all about making strategic choices. How are the desks arranged? Where are the books and supplies? What are the daily routines? All of these things add up to create an environment that feels predictable, safe, and built for learning. This quote from Weinstein just nails it. A simple, tiny choice, like having students sit facing each other at a table, can have a massive impact. It's not just about being able to see each other. He points out that it actively helps develop leadership skills. So yeah, the physical environment has a direct, powerful influence on how we behave and learn. And the psychological climate? Oh, that's every bit as important. You basically have two extremes. In a democratic classroom, the rules are clear, maybe even negotiated. Consequences are fair. And most importantly, communication flows freely. But in an autocratic one, the teacher makes all the rules. They're a strict disciplinarian, and communication can be limited by fear. For a student, the difference between these two worlds is just immense. Okay, this leads to a really fundamental question in all of this. Is your approach going to be proactive or reactive? It's basically the difference between building a fence at the top of a cliff or just parking an ambulance at the bottom. And here's the real difference. Proactive management happens before a problem ever starts. It's all about teaching values, helping students develop self-control, and motivating them from the inside. Reactive management, on the other hand, is just what it sounds like. You're responding to a problem after it's already happened. And let me tell you, the most effective classrooms are overwhelmingly proactive. But of course, let's be real. Even in the most amazing, proactive classrooms, issues are still going to pop up. It's inevitable. So, what's in a teacher's reactive toolkit? Let's take a look. There's definitely no one-size-fits-all answer. A teacher has a whole spectrum of interventions they can use. It ranges from extinction, which is a fancy word for strategically ignoring a minor disruption, all the way up to more serious consequences like a timeout. The real skill is knowing which tool to use and when. Let's start with the most subtle tools in the box, the nonverbal cues. Sometimes a simple look, a quick shake of the head, or even just slowly walking closer to a student is all you need to redirect their behavior without ever stopping the flow of the lesson. It's pretty powerful stuff. The same thing goes for verbal cues. You don't always have to call a student out in front of everyone. Sometimes just a strategic pause in your sentence, lowering your voice, or calmly and distinctly saying a student's name is all it takes to get them right back on track. All right, now for a bit of a curveball. We've talked about all the things a teacher can do, But when is the best course of action to do nothing at all? When is it actually better to just let something go?
Well, the research actually gives us some really clear guidelines here. It's probably best to just ignore a behavior if it's super minor and over quickly, and if it doesn't seem like it's going to grow or spread to other kids. This is especially true if it's coming from a student who's usually on their best behavior. Sometimes paying attention to it just makes it a bigger deal than it needs to.
So what's the bottom line here? When you pull it all together, you realize that great classroom management isn't a list of rules and punishments. No, it's a complete, interconnected system that's designed for success from the very beginning. This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. At the end of the day, it's all about setting up and maintaining a positive learning environment. That's the goal. Everything else, from the seating chart to how you handle disruptions, should serve that one primary goal.
So what are the big takeaways? What should you walk away remembering? First, it's all about creating the right environment on every single level, physically, psychologically, and socially. And second, always remember that the best form of discipline is proactive. It's about getting ahead of the problems and stopping them before they even have a chance to start.
And that brings me to my final thought for you today. We've been talking about classrooms this whole time, but these principles are so much bigger than that, aren't they? How can we use these same ideas about proactive management, about meeting basic needs, to build better environments in our workplaces, on our teams, or even in our own families? Now that is something we're thinking about.